The first text from my husband made me smile. "Don't be late tonight. Mom has a surprise waiting for you." After 8 exhausting months on a military assignment, I drove home with our 1-year-old daughter asleep in her car seat, imagining balloons, hugs, and finally feeling like a family again. Instead, I opened my front door to a living room packed with relatives staring at me in complete silence. My husband slammed a DNA test onto the coffee table. "She's not my daughter." Before I could even process those words, my mother-in-law pointed toward the door. "Take your child and get out." Almost left. Then the front door opened again. "My name is Emily Carter. I'm 29 years old, and for the past 9 years, I've proudly served in the United States Army. People often thank soldiers for their sacrifices, but very few understand the hardest part isn't the long hours or the demanding missions. It's missing birthdays, bedtime stories, and tiny moments with the people you love most." My daughter Lily had just turned 1 while I was away on an extended assignment, and every video call reminded me how much I was missing. My husband Ryan kept telling me not to worry. He promised Lily was happy, healthy, and surrounded by love. During the last few weeks before I returned, he insisted it would be easier if she stayed with him and his mother instead of traveling back and forth to the base. I hated being apart from my little girl, but I trusted him. After all, he was her father. Ryan's messages became unusually sweet as my return date got closer. He counted down the days, telling me how excited everyone was to have me home. Even my mother-in-law, Diane, who had never been particularly affectionate toward me, suddenly started sending warm texts asking what my favorite dinner was and reminding me to drive safely. Looking back now, I realize those messages should have made me suspicious. Instead, they filled me with hope. That afternoon, I buckled Lily into her car seat after picking her up and started the drive home. She smiled at me through the little mirror, babbling happily while I imagined walking into hugs, laughter, and a fresh start together as a family. Then I turned onto our street. The first thing I noticed wasn't my house. It was the long line of unfamiliar cars parked outside. For a moment, I told myself I was overthinking it. Maybe Ryan had invited everyone over for a welcome home dinner. Maybe the surprise he'd mentioned in his text was bigger than I'd imagined. I carried Lily onto my hip, grabbed my overnight bag, and walked toward the front door with a nervous smile. The smile disappeared the second I stepped inside. The living room was packed. Ryan's parents sat together on the couch. His brother and sister-in-law stood near the fireplace. Several aunts, uncles, and cousins filled every chair. Even 2 neighbors I barely knew were there. The room was completely silent. No one said, "Welcome home." No one smiled. Every pair of eyes locked onto me. Lily rested her head against my shoulder, completely unaware that something was terribly wrong. Ryan slowly stepped forward. His expression was cold, almost rehearsed. Without saying a word, he placed a folder on the coffee table. "I think you should look at this," he said. I frowned and reached for it, but before my fingers touched the folder, he pulled it back and flipped it open himself. "This DNA test proves Lily isn't my biological daughter." For several seconds I couldn't even process the words. "What?" I said. "She's not my child." His mother stood immediately. "I knew something wasn't right," Diane declared loudly. "You disappeared for months with the military, and now the truth is finally out." Several relatives exchanged uncomfortable glances. A few quietly nodded as if they'd already decided I was guilty. I stared at Ryan in complete disbelief. "That's impossible," I whispered. "I never cheated on you." "Then explain this," he replied, tapping the paperwork. I leaned closer. Something about those pages felt wrong. Before I could say another word, the front door opened. Every head turned toward the front door. Ryan's great-aunt, Margaret, stepped inside carrying a small gift bag with a bright blue ribbon. "I'm sorry I'm late," she said with a warm smile that quickly faded as she looked around the room. "Why does everyone look like they're attending a funeral?" No one answered. Ryan quietly cleared his throat. "We're dealing with a family matter." Margaret looked at me standing there with Lily in my arms, then at the open folder on the coffee table. "What kind of family matter?" Before Ryan could respond, Diane spoke. "Emily's been lying to us. The DNA test proves Lily isn't Ryan's daughter." Margaret's eyebrows lifted slightly. "A DNA test?" Ryan pushed the folder toward her. "It settles everything." She picked up the report and adjusted her reading glasses. The room fell silent except for Lily softly playing with the buttons on my jacket. Margaret spent nearly a minute reading every page without saying a word. Then she looked up. Who ordered this test? Ryan hesitated. I did. Really? Yes. She lowered the papers onto the table. I spent 32 years managing a medical laboratory before I retired, she said calmly. I've reviewed thousands of legitimate reports. Ryan's face tightened. Margaret tapped the first page. This document is missing required identifiers. She flipped another page. The formatting is inconsistent. Another page. And these reference numbers don't follow standard laboratory reporting practices. The room suddenly felt different. Diane stepped forward. That doesn't mean it's fake. No, Margaret replied evenly. But it does mean no one in this room should be treating it as proof. For the first time since I'd walked into the house, people weren't staring at me. They were staring at Ryan. And in that moment I realized this had never been about discovering the truth. Someone had planned this long before I came home. And I wasn't leaving until I uncovered every part of it. Nobody spoke for several long seconds. Ryan kept staring at the floor while Margaret calmly closed the folder and folded her hands. If this report is genuine, she said, then verifying it should be simple. Ryan looked up. What do you mean? I mean, every legitimate laboratory keeps records. There should be a case number, a verification department, and documentation confirming when the samples were collected. She turned the first page toward everyone. This report has a laboratory name printed at the top. She reached into her purse, pulled out her phone and searched for the company's public customer service number. Diane suddenly stepped forward. Margaret, this is embarrassing. We don't need strangers involved. Margaret didn't even look up. I'm not involving strangers. I'm confirming facts. The representative answered after a short wait. Margaret placed the call on speaker. She politely read the report number exactly as it appeared on the page. Everyone listened. The representative paused. I'm sorry, the woman finally replied. That case number doesn't exist in our system. Silence. Margaret asked if perhaps a digit had been entered incorrectly. The representative checked again. No, ma'am. We have no record of that report. The call ended. Nobody moved. Ryan's face had gone completely pale. His younger brother picked up the paperwork and frowned. These signatures look copied. Another cousin pointed toward the bottom corner. The dates don't even match. I finally stepped forward. While I was deployed, I said quietly, Ryan kept asking me to sign different documents electronically. He always said they were insurance updates or military family forms. As the words left my mouth, every strange memory rushed back. Requests for copies of Lily's birth certificate. Questions about custody paperwork. Odd messages asking where important family documents were stored. They hadn't been random. Someone had been preparing this long before I drove home. Ryan avoided everyone's eyes. Then his uncle broke the silence. He looked directly at Ryan and asked the one question nobody else had dared to ask. If this report isn't real, who created it? Ryan didn't answer his uncle's question. Instead he looked toward his mother. For the first time that evening, Diane seemed unsure of herself. The confidence she'd carried all afternoon disappeared, replaced by nervous silence. His uncle repeated the question. Who made the report? Ryan rubbed both hands across his face before letting out a long breath. It wasn't a real DNA test. The words hit the room like a thunderclap. Several relatives gasped. Diane immediately jumped in. Ryan, don't. No, he interrupted quietly. It's over. He looked at me but I barely recognized the man standing in front of me. I paid someone online to create it. The room erupted. His brother stood up so quickly his chair nearly tipped over. You did what? Ryan lowered his head. I thought, if everyone believed Lily wasn't mine, Emily would lose credibility before I filed for custody. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. See? Custody? He nodded without looking at me. My attorney said judges look at stability. Mom kept saying your military career meant you were gone too much, that Lily would be better off staying with us. Every eye turned toward Diane. She folded her arms defensively. I was protecting my granddaughter. No, Margaret said firmly. You were trying to separate a mother from her child with a lie. No one argued with her. I looked around the room at the relatives who had doubted me only minutes earlier, One by one, their expressions changed from suspicion to embarrassment. Ryan finally met my eyes. I never thought it would go this far. I felt strangely calm. I think you knew exactly how far you wanted it to go. No one spoke after that. The silence was heavier than every accusation that had filled the room earlier. In that moment, I understood something I never expected to learn the day I came home. They hadn't been trying to discover the truth. They had been trying to rewrite it. The shouting eventually stopped. One by one, the relatives who had gathered to judge me quietly picked up their coats and left. A few apologized as they passed. Others couldn't even meet my eyes. I wasn't interested in hearing excuses. I walked upstairs to the bedroom I'd once shared with Ryan and packed a single suitcase. Lily sat on the floor happily stacking blocks, too young to understand that her life had changed forever. Ryan stood in the doorway. "Emily, please don't leave." I folded Lily's favorite blanket and placed it carefully into the bag. "You already asked me to leave," I replied calmly. "You just expected me to leave believing I deserved it." He lowered his head. "I made the biggest mistake of my life." I looked at him for a long moment. "No, Ryan. You made hundreds of choices. You found someone to fake evidence. You invited our families to watch me be humiliated. And worst of all, you tried to take our daughter away by destroying my character." There was nothing left to say after that. Margaret quietly stepped into the hallway. "If you need somewhere safe tonight," she said, "my guest room is ready. Tomorrow, start documenting everything while the details are still fresh." I thanked her. Her kindness reminded me that not everyone in Ryan's family had chosen deception. I picked up Lily, zipped my suitcase and walked toward the front door. No one tried to stop me. Outside, the cool evening air filled my lungs. For the first time since coming home, I could breathe without feeling trapped. Over the following weeks, I found a small apartment near my new duty station. Military legal assistance helped me understand my options, and I focused on creating a peaceful routine for Lily instead of chasing revenge. As painful as that night had been, I slowly realized something unexpected. Walking away hadn't made me weaker. It had protected the only family that truly depended on me. Nearly a year has passed since I carried Lily out of that house with one suitcase and a heart full of questions. Today our home is much smaller than the one Ryan and I once shared. But every room feels peaceful. Every laugh is genuine. Every bedtime story ends with Lily falling asleep knowing she's safe. My military career continues, although I've adjusted my assignments to give us more time together whenever possible. It isn't always easy, but every decision I make now comes from love instead of fear. Margaret and I still talk often. She once told me that truth doesn't always arrive quickly, but when it does, it has a way of exposing everyone exactly as they are. He was right. Ryan eventually admitted the fake DNA report during the legal proceedings. That confession became part of the official record and ended any doubt about what had happened. More importantly, it reminded everyone that lies can create chaos for a while, but they cannot replace the truth forever. Sometimes people ask whether I hate him. I don't. Hate would mean allowing that night to keep living inside me. Instead, I chose something far more valuable. Peace. When I look at Lily now, I don't think about the evening someone tried to take her away from me. I think about the morning after when I promised myself that she would grow up knowing what real trust looks like. She will never have to earn love. She will never mistake humiliation for discipline. And she will never wonder whether her family is a safe place to land. I came home expecting to rebuild my marriage. Instead, I rebuilt my life. Because real family isn't defined by shared DNA. It's defined by the people who protect your heart when someone else tries to break it.